So this video is going to be a comparison between Xilonen, Chiori, Hutao, and Nahida. Hopefully I'll just be going through all of them, list their pros and cons, and hopefully help you guys decide which of them is going to be the best to choose for your account. Alright, so first of all, starting off with Xilonen. Xilonen is mainly just going to be a Geo support. She's going to be support in your team really. Her damage is not really going to be all of that. So she's mainly just a support. I wouldn't really count her as a sub DPS. But yeah, starting off with her pros. First of all, Xilonen is going to be a super good support. She's going to be able to heal you. She's going to be able to provide you with the resistance shred. And she can also use the new Atlas set, which means she's going to give you a lot of damage bonus to the rest of your team. Those are pretty much the full kit of support in the game right now. The only other character who was able to do that was Kazuha, and he was clunkier than Xilonen to use. But with Xilonen, you just need to do reactions and that's it. You don't need to swirl or anything like that. The second pro about her is that she's going to be super free to play friendly. Technically, you don't even really need to build her with anything, really. Unless you have her signature weapon, then that's another story. You might need to build some defense. But if we're talking for her like supportive capabilities in general, you don't really need anything. You just want to upgrade her talent levels and that's it. Just equip the new set. Her resistance shred is just going to scale with talent level. And her healing doesn't really require that much defense to be good. So she's going to be super easy to build. And in fact, you don't really need to build her in the first place. And then finally, the last pro about Xilonen that I talked about before is going to be that she's much easier to use. Comparing it to another character that's going to be pretty comparable to her, that's going to be Kazuha. With Kazuha, you need to swirl elements and stuff like that for you to provide his supportive capabilities. With Xilonen, you don't really need to do that. You just slap her on the team and they're almost going to be automatic buffs. So she's going to be much more easier to use and you can just make sure you have the buffs at all times. Alright, so now moving on to her cons. The only con about her is that she's not necessary at all if you have Kazuha. Now, as I said, she's still going to be a little better than Kazuha, but mainly not in like supportive capabilities. She's just going to be better in terms of like being easier to use. Even her damage bonus might be a little more, but it doesn't really matter. But the biggest thing that she's going to excel from Kazuha is that she's going to be much easier to use with the swirls and stuff like that. Also, if you have longer rotations for your main DPS, then her buffs are going to last longer. That's pretty much it. But with that being said, for most teams, this is not really going to be a problem. So if you already have Kazuha, then her value is just going to drop significantly. I mean, you might want to use her in like your other team, that's valid, but as like a sole support, she's just like a little better Kazuha. That's pretty much it. So if you already have Kazuha, I wouldn't really say her value is going to be as good as if you got her as like a completely new support. Alright, so now moving on to Chiori. Chiori is mainly going to be like a sub DPS, sort of. You can kind of use her as a main DPS, but her main role is just a sub DPS. That's it. So for her pros, the first pro is that she's going to be a super good sub DPS for mono Geo teams. You can just slap her in any mostly Geo team, and she's just going to be dealing extra damage off field. That's it, really. Her damage is going to be pretty decent for a sub DPS, so yeah, she's going to be pretty good. Her second pro is that she's going to be used on field and also pretty flexible. She's preferably used in like Geo teams, or at least with one Geo that can provide you with like a construct. But if you look at it, really, she's Geo and also sub DPS, so you can really use her at any team. Now, her damage is not going to be the best at any team, but she's definitely usable in a lot of teams as just like a sub DPS. She's Geo, so she's not really going to interfere with any like reactions or anything like that. And she's also going to be providing you decent extra damage if you don't really have anyone else to use on the team. So yeah, she's pretty flexible and decent in terms of that. Now, moving on to her cons, the only con about her is that her damage outside of Geo teams is going to be like not ideal to say the least, and she's going to lack as a sub DPS. And that's especially at C0, because then you're only going to have one of her elemental skills, so her damage is pretty much going to be half. And it's not going to be ideal. She's still going to be usable in a lot of teams, but she's definitely not going to be the best option at any of them. So yeah, outside of Geo teams, she's not really all of that, I would say. So if that's your goal, Chiori is probably a skip for that. Now, moving on to Hutao. Hutao has been like one of the first DPSs that come out in the game. She was super good back then, and she's still pretty decent now. It's not like she fell off or anything. I see a lot of people saying she fell off. Well, she actually didn't. And that's pretty much all of her pros, really. She's just that she has decent damage right now. I'm not saying she has the best damage like she once did, but she still has decent damage even compared to the newest DPSs right now. I would definitely put her as like an A tier character at least as a DPS. So if you really need like a DPS on field, Hutao is definitely going to do the job fine, and she can clear pretty much every single content in the game. Now, moving on to her cons, which are going to be a little more than the pros. First of all, she's going to be very clunky to play. You need to keep the HP below 50%. You need to watch that or your damage is going to tank. You need to do like the skip and jump and stuff like that. So she's not really like a plug and play character where you can just like spam a key and that's it. You need to think a little bit with playing Hutao. I'm not saying she's super hard. You can learn it in like a couple hours, but she's not like an autopilot character. The second con about Hutao is that she's not really going to be free to play friendly. Her build is gonna be kind of hard to achieve, and especially with the weapons and stuff like that, she doesn't really have many super good options. So she needs investment to be like super good. Now she can be decent without like huge investment as like just a free-to-play character, but if you want to unlock her full potential, it's definitely not gonna be as easy. And then finally, the final pro is that she's going to have limited team options, which is not really that strange for a main DPS. I mean, every main DPS is going to have their best options for their teams and then, you know, just subpar options. But for Hutao, it's just much more restricted. You pretty much can only play her in vaporized teams like Xingqiu, Xilonen, and some other support, and that's it. Outside of that, she's going to lack a lot of damage, so this is really your only teams for Hutao, just a vaporized team. If you don't have Xingqiu and Xilonen, then Hutao is probably not a good idea anyway. So yeah, her teams are going to be like super restricted. It's pretty much just like one team with some variation. Not really that it's like a super big con, but it's still a con. And now finally moving on to our final character in this patch, which is going to be Nahida. Nahida is just going to be like an off-field Dendro applier and kind of support, and that's pretty much it. For her pros, she's going to be super good Dendro enabler, probably the best right now, to the point where she's very necessary in a lot of teams. She can just apply Dendro to her elemental skill, very good ICDs, which is super good. So if you need a Dendro enabler, Nahida is definitely going to be your first option to go for. Second pro is that she's going to be super free-to-play friendly and easy to build. You pretty much just need to stack elemental mastery and Nahida, and that's it. She gains crit from that, everything from that, so she's one of the easiest characters to build, and she's also very free to play friendly. You have a lot of good weapons, you don't need complicated stats on her artifacts and stuff like that, so I would definitely classify Nahida as being one of the most free to play friendly characters in the game. And then finally, her third pro, which I talked about before, is that she's going to be super necessary in a lot of teams. Any team that requires you to have like a good Dendro enabler to work, pretty much any Dendro reactions teams, Nahida is going to be one of the best characters to use there, and a lot of teams she's going to be necessary because there are no other characters that can apply Dendro as efficiently as Nahida does, especially off field. So yeah, if Dendro is your thing and you have a lot of characters that need Dendro or work best with Dendro, like aggravate reactions, hyper bloom, stuff like that, then Nahida is definitely going to be your go-to op. Now moving on to her cons, which is not really a big con in my opinion, but it's the only thing I can think of. She's not really going to be useful outside of Dendro teams, and she's the Dendro Archon, so that's like obviously expected and normal. But if you're not really planning to build any like super good Dendro teams in the future, then Nahida is not really going to be necessary. All of her kit is mainly focused to work well with like Dendro teams and enable them. So if that's not your thing, then it's probably just a skip. Alright, so now moving on to the final conclusion, how to pick. I'm going to lay this down in a very simple format because each character of those is going to be good in some scenario. So there's not really a clear character to pick, but I'm going to tell you when to pick characters depending on what you want. First of all, if you don't have Kazuha, then I'd say Xilonen is definitely going to be your go-to option. She's just a super good generalist support character. She can support you in pretty much like unlimited amounts of teams. It's legit like the exact same thing with Kazuha and even low better. So Kazuha is a must pick. If you did not have Kazuha, then Xilonen is definitely going to be the next option to go for, and she's even better. So yeah, this is never going to be like a bad investment for your account. I would say just go Xilonen if you're not sure, and that's it. If you don't need her now, you'll definitely need her in some sort of team in the future. It's just that resistance shred, and being a healer, you'll need that in a lot of situations. So yeah, if you don't have Kazuha, then I'd say just go for Xilonen, no brain. If you have a lot of Dendro teammates in general, like characters who need Dendros as their best teams, like Hyper Bloom for example, Aggravate and stuff like that, any character who works best with like Dendro teammates, if your whole account is just like Dendro in general, I would say go for Nahida for sure if you don't already have her. She's going to provide very significant value and unlock a lot of new teams for you. So yeah, if you're interested in Dendro and Dendro reactions in general, like Hyper Bloom, Aggravate, whatever, then Nahida is definitely going to be a super good option and you wouldn't regret going for it. If you really need a DPS right now, you can go for Hutao. I listed her cons before. If you're fine with them, you know, you can build her pretty well, you can have a decent weapon for her, you don't mind her playstyle being a little clunky. If you don't mind all of that, then she's definitely going to be a super good DPS and she can clear most content. And if you need an on-field DPS, you just don't have any DPSs right now or you want one, then Hutao can definitely do the job fine. Wouldn't really say she's the best, but she definitely can get you pretty much anywhere in the game. You can clear anything with her, so if you're desperate for a DPS like right now, then just go for Hutao. You're not really going to regret it. And then finally, this is going to be very like niche, but if you really like mono Geo teams and you have a lot of Geo teammates, Chiori is not like a bad option. Out of this batch, I would say she's not like the best pick, especially with Nahida and Xilonen being there. It's probably better value to pick one of them like for the future in general for your account. But if you have a lot of like Geo DPSs, a lot of Geo teams like Ito, Noel, Go route. I don't know, just the whole Geo stuff. And going Chiori is definitely going to be pretty decent. She's going to be a super good character to help them, and she's going to be a good generalist character too. Or not good, but like decent. So yeah, she's not bad, but unless you really like, you know, the whole Geo scheme, I wouldn't really say go for Chiori in this path. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Tell me which characters you're going for in the comments. See you guys in the next video. Peace.